heritage or being an independent state, and they are on their own two extremists. When I compare, I happen to know everyone in Kochma and Yushchenko and Timoshenko.
They've been like that for many, many decades.
Yeah, they were like this, but it doesn't help. If they pull it to the extreme, they cause their allies to be more kind of extreme or think in extremist terms. I think that Ukraine should become a certain kind of connecting, bridging point between the two players. Of course, Russia and Europe and the West.
I think you're speaking like President Putin more than like President Obama.
Yeah,
because President Obama has a different vision.
Let me tell you, I know President Obama, I sat with him, he's an extremely intelligent person, very clearly with good intentions, so on, still reigning of the most powerful, probably, nation on earth. But there is a need among leaders in order to deal with such crises, to be at the same time extremely realistic about what could be achieved, what could not be achieved, and to be able to enter into the mind of the other side and understand and accept the fact that there are more than one hegemonious point of view or perspective about world events. And there is a legitimate place to more than one perspective. The fact that you are so self-assured about your position doesn't mean that it's true.
Well, Mr. Barak, you sound even more like President Putin, and I would like to press you on that point a little bit. President Obama very harshly criticized the Israeli delegation to the United Nations for not voting to condemn Russia. And the delegation found a very interesting way of dealing with it. They simply didn't show up for the vote rather than abstaining. Why didn't Israel join the West in condemning Russia?
I'm not in government now, so I cannot have the guess like any other.
You're a very experienced politician.
I think
you know
because Israel understands the world is more complicated than it sees. It's not easy for us not to join. America is our main ally and the main supporters, and especially under the Obama administration, the nature, the intimacy of working together, especially in the defense area, the support of America on the intelligence area, unprecedented. We are highly kind of grateful for this. But somehow Israel is a small country. We have to take many interests into account, and I think that that's what led Netanyahu to take this position. And I think that America is too strong to really need Israel vote in any individual. It's more symbolic because they are vetoing many UN Security Council resolutions in order to protect Israel. And I think that they deserve our support. I think Obama is extremely intelligent. He understands the complexity of the world.
He's surely a very intelligent, very educated man, but isn't there a tendency in the United States to equate street protest with democracy? Because I think we saw the same thing during the Arab Spring. Once people took to the streets, it may mean democracy and democratic aspirations, but it also may lead to chaos. Isn't that the same that is happening in Ukraine?
Has certain burden that it carries with itself.
It's being
the moral beacon for the rest of the world. They are in contradicting terms. Mubarak could be an ally for 30 years, but once its own people stands against him, the American sentiment is immediately with the public. So that caused them to be more confused because of this moral kind of incongruency. But I don't criticize because they did a lot for the world by carrying this message from a powerful, successful country. So I think, talking about Ukraine should be allowed to lead its fate. I think that certain element of either autonomies or federal structure is probably the right answer in a way to reflect in politics the very delicate structure of Ukraine as it happened to be, and it probably will allow both players, both Russia, caring about its near abroad and about the strategic meaning of losing kind of Ukraine, and the West, which wants to spread with its values or ideas, to find a way. Several people, I believe, mentioned Finland as an example. Finland was quite independent and economically kind of open place, but they made a deliberate point not to alienate a neighbor which has its own interest, especially in regard to security, along decades. I think that something of this nature, and when people are caught into symbolic thinking and kind of metaphors and slogans, that's a risk. There will be a risk for America that it will end up having a hollow slogans rather than policy.
Well, can I pick up on that point? I would like actually to quote one Jewish proverb which says that don't be sweet lest you be eaten, don't be bitter lest you be spewed out. And I think it really describes the Kremlin attitude right now, because Kremlin doesn't try to be sweet with America, it doesn't try to be bitter, but there is a real effort on the part of the United States to spew Russia out at the moment, to isolate
I don't think so.
Russia. And my question to you is whether, when you consider Ukrainian potential benefits, potential gains for both sides there, as well as when we put on the other side of the scale, all the cooperation in the Middle East, on Iran, on Syria, on Afghanistan, whether this fight over Ukraine is really worth it, because all that strategic cooperation that we were talking about in the first part is now suspended, or
I think that Putin make it explicit, and Lavrov, and they have much more accumulated world stage experience, their European, so American colleagues, but they put it very explicitly. They keep talking about the Americans as our partners. And it's true, there is an element of truth in it. I think the Americans also will understand it after the first kind of exercise. But you have to remember, Americans, they have to back the Baltics, they have to back Poland, they have to back other cases where, by extrapolation, people might be worried if this is the attitude of Russia toward the Crimea, toward eastern Ukraine, probably what is waiting down the stream. And I think that it's not too late to meet on high level, realizing the legitimacy of interests of both sides, talking honestly about history, even of the last decades, what happened in different corners of the world, and reach certain understanding. What each side can do and what either side cannot do without raising too much tension. And I think that it will be a grave mistake if Ukraine will end up to be a symbolic point of kind of a clash over kind of things that cannot be solved. Even if you think from the American-European side, the only way to make it more equal, because in the short term, Putin has more cards. In the long term, the Western America has at least the same powerful cards.
Mr. Barak, on that note, I would like to quote you, because I heard you say in one of the interviews that you can impose war on countries, but you cannot impose peace. It takes two to tango, and I think the willingness on the part of the Kremlin is there. My question is whether the willingness is there on the part of Washington.
I think that within a short time, you will see more kind of coming to the ground on the rest of the world. Because think of it. Assume for a moment that the world wants to be more assertive toward Russia's intentions in its near abroad. The only way to do it is by making Europe energy independent. But that takes 8 years or 10 years. None of the present leaders in Europe will be still in power by the time it ends. So there is a need to accept realities. There is certain interdependency which goes deeper than, and there are interests. It was totally different story if Russia showed some appetite to, to something that happens in Germany, Austria, or Switzerland.
Or Israel, for example. Israel has a very large Russian community. 20% of your population are Russians. But do you really think Russia would go to Israel to protect
for Israel, Israel has always a spatial filter to look at things, and that's the attitude toward Jews. And in this regard, I should admit that Putin is, when you compare him to the people who sat at the Kremlin in the last 500 years or 600 years, he's the more open one. And I look, the attitude to Jews from the Kremlin is something telling. And Putin has the most kind of open, normal,
Mr.
intuitive.
Barak, I think it's evidence to the freedom of speech in Russia that I have to cut you when you are talking about Putin and saying pleasant things, but unfortunately we have to leave it there. I appreciate you being on the show. And to our viewers, please join the conversation on our Twitter, YouTube and Facebook pages, and I hope to see you again, same place, same time, here on Worlds Apart.